Hey fam. With the Switch 2 out and Breath of the Wild now playable in glorious 60 FPS, an old source of contention within it and pretty much all other games with a completion element to them made its way back to the forefront of my mind recently, and it's one I'd been meaning to get around to talking about anyway. Within the gaming community, 100% completion is often viewed as something of a badge of honor, not something that anyone is shamed for not engaging in, but something that players will often encourage others to aspire to, so to speak. And as the journey to 100% is often long and arduous, developers are encouraged to make the journey worthwhile, and frequently held in contempt when they neglect or in some way fail to do so. As someone who has never gone out of his way to 100% any game, however, not even frequently replayed favorites, I have a somewhat different view of the 100% grind, and whether or not it should even be reasonably engaged with in most situations. I want to approach this discussion from two angles, though. The holistic act of completion itself, for items or objectives which exist in fixed, tangible locations, and the act of balancing items with random but low drop rates. Either of these can come in the form of collectibles with or without intrinsic gameplay-altering abilities, so I'd like to discuss that element as well. Let's start with the holistic act of completion, though, by way of Breath of the Wild's most infamous completion reward, Hestu's Gift. Some quick context for anyone who's never played Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is a Zelda game with a massive open world, and scattered throughout this vast map are collectibles called Korok seeds, which can be obtained from engaging in small puzzles and challenges, and are intended to be traded to a specific vendor for upgrades to Link's equipment inventory. This vendor is a large and in-charge Korok named Hestu. While the Korok seed gathering mechanic was initially met with some praise upon the game's launch, many players became soured towards it when it was revealed that the in-game reward for collecting all of the Korok seeds, every single one, was a useless trophy item with no intrinsic function. This item is referred to in-game as Hestu's Gift. Even though Korok seeds do offer a gameplay benefit for much of the experience, the amount necessary to max out Link's inventory is just under half of the total which exists in the game world, so collecting all of them for that completion reward quickly becomes quite a hefty task to undertake for its own sake and nothing else. This wouldn't necessarily be an issue if it weren't for the sheer scope of the task, but unfortunately, Breath of the Wild contains a grand total of 900 Korok seeds. And yet, to make matters even worse, the devious minds over at Nintendo HQ seemingly decided to rub salt in the wound of this underwhelming completion reward by designing Hestu's Gift to resemble a golden pile of literal shit. And while I completely understand why this revelation would get more completion-oriented players up in arms, I've always interpreted Hestu's Gift in a different and honestly more flattering light. Hestu's Gift may be given to the individual player as a sort of trophy, but I think it's really more of a message to the community at large. You see, by the time Breath of the Wild launched, we were already well into the age of modern social media, and the developers were well aware of the way information disseminates across the internet. While many players may choose to go into an experience largely blind, nobody truly exists totally outside the bubble of the online community. What I'm getting at here is that I think it was pretty obvious to all parties involved that Hestu's Gift was never going to take 99.99% of Breath of the Wild's player base by surprise. It may have been a slap in the face to the, shall we say, elite few who managed to obtain it within the first 24 hours of the game's release, but the information on the quote-unquote reward for 100%ing the Korok seeds was readily accessible to the entire remaining player base within probably only a day or so of the game's launch, well before the average player would have even considered undertaking such an obscene task. The reason I bring this up, however, is because this is the context in which I've always interpreted Hestu's Gift as a message from the developers to the players. Or rather, the in-game item itself may be the world's shittiest trophy, but the simple knowledge of its existence and appearance are the message. You see, in my eyes, Hestu's Gift is not meant to be a reward for collecting all 900 Korok seeds, but a deterrent from doing it in the first place. But duck, I hear you asking. Why would the developers want to actively discourage players from engaging with some of the content they worked so hard to create? Excellent question, astute viewer. To answer it, we must first take a look at the seed's true intended purpose, and the reason for their absurdly high body count of 900. Breath of the Wild is, as I stated earlier, an absolutely gargantuan game, and the true purpose of the seeds is to serve as currency for your inventory upgrades. So why are there so many more seeds than the player can actually make use of? Simple. The reason that there are 900 Korok seeds is so that no matter where the player chooses to venture within the game world, there will be a good amount to organically discover. That's it. The seeds number was never about giving players an exhausting scavenger hunt, it was about littering useful breadcrumbs in every corner of the game world, which is important because Breath of the Wild is not only completely nonlinear, but designed to be engaged with as much or as little as the player desires. In other words, there are 900 Korok seeds so that no matter where you go in Hyrule, no matter which direction you choose to venture off in, you will find a healthy amount of the currency for the valuable upgrades that it enables. And when viewed from this angle, I believe that the message of Hestu's Gift becomes clear. Hestu's Gift, not even the trophy itself, but the knowledge of its existence, is meant to impart that you should not be aspiring to collect all 900 Korok seeds. It's tedious and exhausting and not fun, and the developers know this. If the reward had been something cool or useful, then way more players would have undertaken that equal parts Herculean and monotonous task, very much to the detriment of their own enjoyment of the experience. The Korok seeds need to exist in such high numbers in order to properly fill the game world, but they were never intended to be collected beyond the point of their intrinsic value. So listen to the wisdom that Hestu's Gift imparts. Don't waste your time by inserting a layer of tediousness into the otherwise wonderful experience that Breath of the Wild is. But don't hold the game in contempt for Hestu's Gift either. Understand that it is simply the developer's way of nudging you off the path of obsessive completion when it will not positively serve your experience with the game. On the other end of the completion spectrum, however, is a somewhat different dilemma. I'm referring to games with collectibles with extremely low drop rates. Often, these will be pieces of stat-altering equipment, or in some cases, even full-on unique gameplay-altering abilities, as in the case of the FiGGYZ-styled Castlevania titles. This phenomenon is present in pretty much all of these games, from Symphony of the Night all the way through the games bundled with the modern Castlevania Advance and Dominus collections, but for the purposes of this video, let's look to the Sorrow duology, as the issue is at its most pronounced here. Before we get into that, however, I just want to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, FiGGYZ. FiGGYZ are a brand new type of magnetic collectible figure depicting characters across a broad variety of game and anime franchises in a distinctly stylized but still appealingly uniform pixel art style. Current and upcoming waves feature franchises including all of the Castlevania Dominus Collection protagonists and some Symphony of the Night characters as well, but many more are yet to come, and I can't wait for you to see some of what I've seen so far. FiGGYZ are built with premium materials, with each one having a solid weight and feel to them. Each one also comes bundled with reversible metal backgrounds for 2 display styles in one, a clean swappable display base, a wall-mounted magnet which allows them to be mounted to other surfaces with their backdrops, and the chance for a randomly inserted gold, silver, or bronze hidden chase variant. Every component, from FiGGYZ to backdrops, is modular and swappable as well. On top of all that, each FiGGYZ comes with a QR code which allows collectors to track their growing collection on the FiGGYZ app. This app will also serve as a hub for the FiGGYZverse, coming soon with even more features. And at only $14.99 SRP, FiGGYZ offer an incredible value, containing not only the figures themselves, but the reversible art backgrounds, digital tracking, and hidden chase elements all included in the package. So, if you'd like to get in on the action and help support the channel, use the promo code in the description to get 5% off all orders over $50. Once again, big thanks to FiGGYZ for partnering with the channel. Anyway, some more quick context for those unfamiliar with Castlevania Aria and Dawn of Sorrow. In these titles, the protagonist, Soma, is able to absorb the souls of defeated monsters, granting him new attacks and abilities to use. This is cool as shit, in case you couldn't tell from the description alone, but the trade-off is that most of these monster souls are dropped randomly and have extremely low drop rates to boot. Compounding this issue, in the eyes of many players, is that the souls themselves are very much not created equally. Some are clearly way more powerful and useful than others, which leads many players to refer to the lower quality souls as being outright useless. And when this is combined with the sheer tediousness of 100%ing items with a low odds random drop rate, the 100%ing experience for the Sorrow Duology is also quite often lambasted. Now, since there are sort of two issues at play here, I want to tackle each separately. But right up front, I'm going to tell you that once again, I think the solution here is simply to not bother 100%ing these games, even if that sounds like a cop-out. First, let's talk about the low drop rates. Are they annoying? Absolutely. Do they make gathering the souls you're likely to be most interested in way more of a pain than it needs to be? Most assuredly. However, I think that this perspective too is missing the forest for the trees a bit. You see, I would posit that the true purpose of giving souls low random drop rates isn't to make collecting all of them a huge pain in the ass, it's to encourage players to make use of and experiment with the ones that they actually have. The ones that they randomly came into possession of while playing the game organically. And not only does it allow each run of the game to potentially feel very different if this playstyle is embraced, but as an added bonus, the sheer variance in soul power levels and usefulness becomes more of a fun little puzzle to work around within the realm of player expression. After all, much like in game design itself, limitations often breed creativity. And in the case of action games, such as these, making use of what fate hands you, regardless of its place in the game's meta, is bound to generate more variety within your replays than just stubbornly sticking to the objectively best souls on every single go-around. With that in mind, let's look at the other issue at play here: the sheer tediousness of embarking on 100% soul collection, should you choose to do it anyway, like the degenerate you are. The Castlevania Sorrow Duology offers a more traditional reward for going the extra mile here, but I would argue that in doing so, it subjects the player to exactly the scenario that Hestu's gift is looking to avoid. That being, encouraging the player to engage with a task of thoroughly unsatisfying tedium. You see, in both Aria and Dawn of Sorrow, the reward for collecting every soul in the game is the Chaos Ring, which is an equipable accessory that grants Soma unlimited mana with which to make use of monster soul abilities. This is extremely cool and useful, but as I just said, it also inherently encourages players to engage with arguably the most toxic aspects of the game's design. It's up to the individual to decide whether that reward is actually worth the hassle, but it's assuredly a more arduous decision to make than in the case of Hestu's gift. So, what has been my point in all of this? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that not everybody plays games to completion, but doing so has its own rewards and appeals to certain types of players. My intention here certainly isn't to shame completionists, or to imply that playing games this way is never worth the climb, but I do want to highlight a certain way of thinking about completion playthroughs that I don't think gets discussed very often. If a completion reward is deliberately awful, I think it can be viewed as a sign that the developers respect your time enough to communicate that you shouldn't be engaging in completion in their game. And if you listen to that message, it may even help you to understand why the objects of completion exist in the abundance that they do, as in the case of Hestu's gift. On the other hand, if a completion reward is desirable, it may unintentionally end up leaving a sour final taste in the player's mouth, if the hunt for that reward is the last thing they experience with the game. Additionally, I think more players should think of unbalanced, randomly dropped rewards as a signal to play a game with the hand you're dealt, and then replay it for a substantially different loadout and experience, rather than just stopping to grind out all the best shit on every single playthrough, and completely disregarding the suboptimal content. But hey, that's just my view on the matter. You do you, fam. And if you've made it this far, then thanks for sticking around and following through to 100% completion of this video. I hope it wasn't a tedious 100% experience, even though I cannot offer you a satisfying extrinsic reward for your efforts. I will remind you, however, that FiGGYZ can offer an extrinsic reward for your hard-earned currency, and unlike Soma's Monster Souls, each purchase has a 100% drop rate. So, if you're feeling like a completionist and you'd like to help support the channel, go ahead and use the code in the description with your purchase. But if you're more of a non-100%er like myself, a simple like and subscribe help just as much. And let me know in the comments of any completion experiences which you feel offer a similar dilemma. Perhaps the reward is desirable to a fault, or perhaps it's undesirable in a way that doesn't feel calculated. I say this all the time, but it's true. I make these videos to have a conversation, so I really do see and respond to the vast majority of comments that are left. I'm not just using you for an algorithm boost. Alright, that's it for today, guys. Peace out.